The Omega's Redemption by author July. Summary. In a world where power and status determine your worth, Rosie Holland, a lowly Omega, has spent her life as a slave in the Blackthorn Pack. Broken, unseen, and unloved, she has long accepted her fate. But deep within, she still harbors a faint hope that maybe one day her mate will come and rescue her from the chains of her brutal past. Damon Blackwood, the ruthless billionaire leader of the Nightshade Hollow Pack, is feared and revered across the land. His pack thrives under his reign, but Damon is haunted by the one thing missing from his life: his mate. Driven by a prophecy, he embarks on a search that leads him to Rosie, a woman who has endured unimaginable pain. When Damon claims Rosie as his Luna, she is thrust into a life of unimaginable luxury and love. Will Rosie embrace the destiny that awaits her, or will the darkness of her past destroy her chance at happiness? And can Damon prove that even the most broken hearts deserve love? Fate brought them together, but will it be enough to keep them from falling apart? Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're listening from and what kind of stories you enjoy most. We love hearing from our listeners.
Chapter 1: Omega's Wish. The cold stone floor bit into Rosie's knees as she scrubbed, her fingers raw and bleeding. The dim light filtering through the small window above offered little warmth, casting long shadows across the cramped room. Her heart ached, not from the physical labor, but from the emptiness that had taken root. She had been born into the pack, weak and worthless in the eyes of her peers. Victor Thorne's voice echoed through the pack house as he barked orders, his tone as sharp as the whip he often carried. Rosie flinched at the sound, her body tensing instinctively. She had learned long ago to avoid his gaze and shut her head and mouth. Any sign of defiance or strength was met with cruelty, and she had no strength to offer. "Hey, Rosie!" Victor's voice boomed, sending a shiver down her spine. She stood quickly, her knees trembling as she turned to face him. His towering figure blocked the doorway, his cold eyes narrowing as he looked her over. "You missed a spot," he snarled, pointing to an imaginary blemish on the floor. "I'm sorry, Alpha," she whispered, her voice barely audible. She bowed her head, avoiding his piercing gaze. "Sorry isn't good enough," he growled, stepping closer until she could feel his hot breath on her skin. "You're useless, just like your parents were, a waste of space in my pack." His words cut deep, but she forced herself to remain still, to endure his wrath without a tear. She had long since learned that tears were a sign of weakness, and weakness was something she couldn't afford. Victor grabbed her chin roughly, forcing her to look up at him. "You're nothing, Rosie. Nothing but a pathetic excuse for a wolf. You should be grateful I let you stay here at all." Grateful. The word echoed in her mind, a bitter reminder of her reality. She should be grateful. Thankful for the scraps of food she was given, the roof over her head, the life she had, no matter how miserable it was. But deep down, buried beneath the layers of pain and humiliation, was a small flicker of hope. A hope that maybe, just maybe, her life didn't have to be this way. As Victor released her with a sneer, she stumbled back, her thoughts drifting to the stories she had heard as a child. Stories of mates, soulmates, destined to find each other and share a bond stronger than anything in the world. She had dreamed of that bond, of finding someone who would see her as more than just an Omega who would love her despite her weaknesses. But as the years passed, that dream had faded, crushed under the weight of reality. Yet, the flicker of hope remained a stubborn ember that refused to die out completely. "Get back to work," Victor snapped, turning his back on her. She obeyed, dropping to her knees again, but her mind was far from the task. What if there was someone out there for her? Someone who would save her from this life, who would see the value in her that no one else did? The thought was almost too much to bear, a dangerous fantasy that threatened to break her heart again. As the day dragged on, her body moved mechanically, her hands scrubbing and cleaning as her mind wandered. She imagined a life where she wasn't a slave, where she wasn't treated like dirt beneath everyone's feet, where she was loved and cherished, not for what she could do, but for who she was. But she pushed it back down whenever the hope grew too strong, reminding herself of the harsh truth. She was an Omega, and Omegas didn't get happy endings. They didn't find mates who would sweep them off their feet. They were born to serve, to be the lowest of the low, and that was all there was to it. By night's fall, she was exhausted, her body aching from the day's work. She curled up on the thin mattress in the corner of her tiny room, pulling the threadbare blanket over her shoulders. The moonlight streamed through the window, casting a soft glow over her face as she closed her eyes. Later, a sound outside her door made her freeze. Heavy, purposeful footsteps approached her room. Her heart pounded in her chest as she listened, fear tightening its grip on her throat. The door creaked open, and she held her breath, her body trembling. Alara, her friend, stood in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the dim hallway light. "Rosie," she said, his voice low and dangerous. "There's someone here to see you." Her eyes widened in shock, her heart racing as a million thoughts flooded her mind. Who could it be? No one ever came to see her. No one cared enough to. Alara stepped aside, and a tall and imposing figure emerged from the shadows. Her breath caught in her throat as she stared at the man before her, his presence filling the small room. "Rosie," he said, his voice deep and commanding, "it's time to leave." The words hung in the air, heavy with promise and danger. Her mind reeled with confusion, and fear battled within her as she tried to comprehend what was happening. Who was this man, and why was he here for her? And most importantly, what did he mean by leave? The questions swirled in her mind, but before she could speak, the man stepped forward, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. "Trust me," he said softly, his voice a stark contrast to the coldness she was used to. "I'm here to help you." Her heart pounded in her chest as she looked up at him, her thoughts racing. Could this be real? Could this be the moment she had been dreaming of, when someone would finally save her from this hellish life? But Alara's voice cut through the silence before she could find the courage to respond. "Hurry up, Rosie," she spat, "or you'll regret it." Her breath hitched as she looked between Alara and the stranger, her mind spinning with fear and uncertainty. And then, with a final glance at the man who had appeared out of nowhere, she decided. She took a step forward, leaving behind the only life she had ever known, and walked into the unknown, towards a future she could hardly hope for. As she steps into the hallway, she suddenly senses a powerful aura from the stranger, something she's never felt before. Her heart skips as she realizes, could this man be her mate? Suddenly, there was a heavy knock on the door, jolting Rosie out of her sleep. "Rosie, Victor wants you outside." The voice of an old woman was heard outside. Rosie rubs her eyes. "It was just a dream," she muttered. Looking at the clock, she hadn't gone to bed for an hour. "Rosie!" the old woman shouted once more. "Yes, coming out," Rosie answered weakly, her voice laced with disappointment. Will she be stuck in this small room for the rest of her life, wishing someone meant for her would come and save her? Chapter 2. The Prophecy. Damon Blackwood stood on the balcony of his expansive mansion, his sharp gaze scanning the vast expanse of land that stretched endlessly before him. The night was still, the air crisp, carrying the faintest scent of pine and earth. Below, the dense forest of Nightshade Hollow, the territory of his powerful pack, lay shrouded in the silvery glow of the moonlight. The sounds of the night, the rustle of leaves, and the occasional distant howl of wolves reminded him of the world over which he ruled. But Damon was more than just an alpha. He was a man of immense power in the world of wolves and the human realm. As the alpha of Nightshade Hollow, Damon's name commanded respect and fear in equal measure. His pack was the largest and most formidable in the region, a force no rival dared to challenge. But his influence extended far beyond the boundaries of his territory. Damon was also a billionaire, a titan in the business world, whose empire spanned industries as diverse as real estate, technology, and finance. He had built his fortune with the same brutality and precision with which he led his pack, amassing wealth and power that few could even dream of. Born into the prestigious Blackwood lineage, Damon was groomed from a young age to take over the pack and the family's vast business empire. His father, Marcus Blackwood, was a legendary alpha, known for his cunning and strength, and his mother, Elena, was a shrewd businesswoman who had expanded the family's holdings during her time. Damon inherited not only their sharp minds and imposing presence, but also a fierce determination to surpass their achievements. By age 25, Damon had taken over the reins of the family's business empire, turning it into a global powerhouse. His swift and calculated decisions often left his competitors scrambling to keep up. He was known for his ability to spot opportunities where others saw none, to turn failing companies into profit-generating machines, and to strike deals that others deemed impossible. Under his leadership, Blackwood Enterprises had grown exponentially, its influence spreading across continents. But Damon was not content with simply being a successful businessman. He had also dedicated himself to his role as alpha, strengthening Nightshade Hollow and ensuring that his pack was the most powerful in the land. He ruled with an iron fist, his authority unquestioned, his decisions final. The pack thrived under his leadership, its members loyal and robust, bound by a code of honor that Damon had instilled in them. Yet, despite all his successes, there was one thing he had yet to achieve: finding his mate. Damon's dark eyes, as cold and unforgiving as the night, reflected the inner turmoil he kept hidden from the world. The Blackwood name was synonymous with power, a legacy he had upheld with every ounce of his being. But the weight of that legacy pressed heavily on his shoulders, a constant reminder of his duty to his pack and his family. Nightshade Hollow needed an heir to carry on the Blackwood bloodline and ensure the pack's future. And that meant finding his mate, the one woman destined to stand by his side. For years, Damon had pushed aside the need to find his mate, focusing instead on building his empire and leading his pack. He had told himself that there was time, that the right moment would come when it was meant to. But now, as he stood alone on the balcony, he felt an urgency that he could no longer ignore. The sensation had grown more robust with each passing day, a pull deep within him, a primal instinct that told him his mate was near. He had always prided himself on his control and ability to keep his emotions in check. This skill had served him well in business and leadership. But this was different. This was something beyond his control, something he couldn't push aside or dismiss. It gnawed at him, consuming his thoughts and driving him to take action. "Jax," Damon called, his voice steady, but laced with the authority that came naturally to him. His beta, Jax Stone, appeared within moments, his expression serious and attentive. Jax had been by Damon's side for years, a trusted friend, confidant, and fierce warrior. They had built the Nightshade Hollow Pack together, shaping it into today's formidable force. Jax knew Damon better than anyone, and he could see the tension in his alpha's stance, the restlessness in his eyes. "Yes, Alpha?" Jax's voice was calm, but there was a hint of curiosity. He had seen Damon face countless challenges, but this was different. This was personal. Damon turned to face him, his gaze unwavering. "It's time, Jax. I can feel her. She's close, closer than ever before. We need to find her." Jax's brow furrowed slightly, but they didn't question Damon's instincts. He knew better than to doubt the alpha's intuition, especially regarding something as important as finding his mate. "You're sure?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Damon nodded, his jaw set in determination. "Yes, I've felt the pull growing stronger every day. I can't ignore it any longer. We need to start the search immediately." Jax straightened, his expression resolute. "I'll mobilize the scouts. We'll cover every inch of our territory and beyond." We'll find her, Alpha. Damon's gaze drifted back to the horizon, his mind racing with thoughts of the prophecy passed down through generations. The prophecy spoke of an Omega, a female wolf who would balance his strength with her gentleness, who would be the key to their pack's future. Damon had always been skeptical of such tales, dismissing them as myths meant to inspire hope in the pack. But now, he couldn't shake the feeling that the prophecy was accurate, that his mate was the one it had foretold. "The prophecy, Jax," Damon said, his voice low but filled with conviction. "It speaks of an Omega who will be my perfect match and help me lead the pack into a new era. I've always been reluctant to believe it, but now, I know she's the one." Jax's eyes widened slightly at the mention of the prophecy. It was a story they had all heard, woven into their pack's history. But hearing Damon speak of it with such certainty was surprising and significant. "You believe she's the one?" Jax asked, his voice tinged with awe. Damon's lips pressed into a thin line, his resolve unwavering. "I don't just believe it, Jax. I know it. The connection is too strong to ignore. She's out there, and I must find her before it's too late." Jax nodded, his expression hardening with determination. "Then we won't rest until she's found. I'll assemble the team and get started immediately. We'll leave no stone unturned." As Jax turned to leave, Damon placed a hand on his shoulder, stopping him. His gaze softened for a moment, revealing the depth of his emotions. "This isn't just about duty, Jax. It's personal. She's the key to everything. Our future, our legacy. I need her." Jax's eyes met Damon's, and for a brief moment, the two shared an understanding that went beyond words. "I understand, Damon, and we'll find her, whatever it takes." Damon released his hold on Jax, watching as his beta disappeared into the shadows of the mansion. The silence of the night returned, but it no longer felt peaceful. It felt charged, electric, like the calm before a storm. The hunt had begun, and Damon knew nothing would be the same once he found her. He remained on the balcony with his mixed emotions. The search for his mate was more than just a quest. It was a mission that would determine the future of his pack and his empire. Damon knew that once he found her, the balance of power would shift. She would be his partner, his equal, who would share in his triumphs and burdens. As he turned to head back inside, a sudden, intense sensation washed over him, stopping him in his tracks. It was unlike anything he had ever felt, an overwhelming connection, a surge of energy that took his breath away. His heart pounded in his chest, and for a moment, he could hardly breathe. She was close, closer than he had ever imagined. The realization hit him like lightning, sending a shockwave through his entire being. Damon gripped the railing, his mind racing as the sensation grew more insistent. Could she be within his territory already? Had she been here all along, waiting for him to find her? Chapter 3: Slave Mate. The dense canopy of the forest surrounding Blackthorn Pack loomed like a wall of shadow, shrouding everything in secrecy. Jack Stone, beta of the Nightshade Hollow Pack, crouched low behind a thicket of bushes, his sharp eyes locked on the distant figures moving through the rival pack's territory. Beside him, his companion and trusted scout, Ethan, kept watch, their senses on high alert. They had been tracking the rival pack for days, following the faintest of leads, and now, finally, their search had brought them here. Jax's mind raced as he recalled the descriptions from the prophecy. An Omega, her beauty unmatched, her spirit gentle yet firm, a beacon of hope even in the darkest circumstances. Initially, he had been skeptical, dismissing the tales as little more than folklore. But as the signs grew more robust and Damon's instincts became impossible to ignore, Jax threw himself into the search with renewed purpose. And now, as he observed the figures in the distance, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were closer than ever before. "There," Ethan whispered, nodding toward a group of wolves gathered near a small, dilapidated cabin on the outskirts of Blackthorn's territory. That's the one they've been talking about. Jax's gaze sharpened as he focused on the figure Ethan had pointed out. She stood apart from the others, her posture meek, her movements slow and deliberate, as she carried a heavy load of firewood into the cabin. Even from this distance, Jax could see the unmistakable signs of exhaustion in her demeanor. Her shoulders slumped under the weight of the wood and her burdens. But despite her worn appearance, there was something about her, an ethereal beauty that seemed to shine through the grime and weariness. Her long, silver-blonde hair fell in soft waves down her back, catching the setting sun's light in a way that made it seem almost luminous. Though pale from lack of sunlight, her skin held a delicate porcelain quality, unmarred except for the bruises and scratches that spoke of her harsh life. And her eyes, Jax could see them even from this distance, were a striking shade of violet, so rare and captivating that it took his breath away. This was her. There was no doubt in his mind. "That's her," Jax murmured, his voice tinged with awe and disbelief. "The Omega from the prophecy." Ethan nodded, his expression grim. "It looks like she's been living like this for years, Jax. The Blackthorn Pack treats her like a slave. She's the lowest of the low in their hierarchy, abused and neglected by everyone." Jax's jaw clenched in anger, his fists tightening at his sides. The thought of Damon's mate, his future Luna, being subjected to such cruelty made his blood boil. How could anyone treat her like this? She was meant to be cherished, protected, and revered. Instead, she was living in squalor, her spirit crushed by years of mistreatment. "We need to get her out of here," Jax said, his voice low and determined. "Damon has to know. He needs to see this for himself." Ethan nodded in agreement. "We should return to Nightshade Hollow immediately. The longer she stays here, the more danger she's in. Victor's pack is ruthless. There's no telling what they might do if they realize she's important." With one last glance at the cabin, Jax signaled Ethan to follow him. They moved swiftly through the underbrush, their footsteps silent, their presence undetected by the rival pack. Damon paced his office, his mind racing about the prophecy and the Omega who would soon be his. Jax and Ethan had returned to Nightshade Hollow. He turned his attention to them, who stood waiting by the large window overlooking the forest. "Tell me everything," Damon demanded, his voice low and dangerous. "I need to know every detail." Jax nodded, his expression serious. "We followed the trail to Blackthorn Pack, as you ordered. It wasn't easy, but we managed to locate her. She matches the description from the prophecy perfectly, Damon. Her beauty is otherworldly, but the way they treat her, it's despicable. She's forced to do the menial work, living in a rundown cabin on the outskirts of their territory. The pack treats her like she's worthless." Damon's hands clenched into fists, his anger barely contained. The thought of his mate being subjected to such cruelty made his wolf snarl in fury. "And you're certain she's the one?" Ethan, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. "I've seen a lot in my time, Alpha, but I've never seen anyone like her. There's a strength in her, a resilience despite everything she's been through. And those eyes, you'll know the moment you see her. She suits the prophecy's description." Damon's heart pounded in his chest. He had always been a man of action, of decisiveness, but this was different. This was personal. He could feel the bond pulling at him, urging him to go to her, to protect her, and he would. No one would stand in his way. He had built an empire and commanded the respect of wolves and humans alike, yet he had been powerless to protect the wolf who mattered most. That would change now. He would bring her to Nightshade Hollow, where she would be as safe, cherished, and loved as she deserved. "Cancel all my meetings for the next few days," Damon said, his voice clipped as he addressed his assistant, who stood nervously by the door. "I need to focus on this." "Yes, Alpha," she replied, her tone respectful, but laced with curiosity. It wasn't often that Damon canceled his business obligations, but she knew better than to question him. "We leave at dawn," Damon said, his voice cold and relentless. Prepare the pack. We're going to bring her home. Jax and Ethan nodded, their expressions reflecting the seriousness of the mission ahead. They knew the risks. Confronting the Blackthorn Pack on their territory was no small task, but they also knew that failure was not an option. As they left to make the necessary preparations, Damon's thoughts were consumed by the image of the woman who would soon be his. He hadn't even met her yet, but already she was a part of him, a missing piece of his soul that he was determined to claim. His mate was the key to everything, the future of his pack, the continuation of his bloodline, and, though he had never admitted it to anyone, the piece of his heart that had always felt incomplete. But even as he made his plans, a nagging doubt crept into his mind. Would she accept him? Would she see past the cold, ruthless exterior he had built over the years to the man who longed for her love? Or would she fear him, as so many others did? Damon pushed his thoughts aside, focusing on the task at hand. He would worry about that later. For now, his only goal was to find her, bring her home, and ensure her safety. And if Blackthorn Pack refused to let her go, Damon's eyes darkened, his wolf growling low in his chest. He would tear them apart if they dared to stand in his way. Chapter 4. The Rescue. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a silver glow over the woods, as Alpha Damon led his pack through the Blackthorn Pack territory. There were 20 black SUVs packed with well-trained wolves. As much as possible, he wants to get his mate formally, so he chose to bring cars, accompanied by wolves in case things get ugly. Every wolf was on edge, knowing that a confrontation was imminent, but Damon's mind was focused, his senses tuned to one thing and one thing only, his mate. The word echoed in his mind like a drumbeat pulsing through his blood. Ever since Jax had described her, the Omega enslaved by the Blackthorn Pack, Damon had felt a pull he could not deny. It was more than instinct. It was a bond, an invisible thread that connected him to the woman who was meant to be his mate. He could feel her now. The closer they got, the stronger the bond tugged at him. As they approached the edge of the Blackthorn Pack's main settlement, their cars slowed, their sharp eyes scanning the landscape ahead. The pack's compound was nestled deep within the woods, a sprawling collection of cabins and buildings, surrounded by a high wall of thick logs. Guards patrolled the perimeter, but were no match for Damon's well-trained wolves. They were prepared for whatever might come next. Alpha Damon got out of the car. Then, through the trees, Damon saw her. She stood in the distance, her figure illuminated by the moon's pale light. Even from afar, he could recognize the fragile beauty Jax had spoken of. Her long, silver-blonde hair shimmered in the moonlight, her slight frame almost lost in the oversized rags she wore. She was gathering firewood near a small cabin, her movements slow and tired, as though every step was a struggle. Damon's breath caught in his throat. This was her, his mate. His wolf stirred restlessly inside him, the primal instinct to protect and claim to roar to life. But Damon forced himself to stay calm, to keep his emotions in check. They were not here to cause a scene, yet. He would handle this with diplomacy first, but if the Blackthorn Pack resisted, he was ready to unleash hell. As if sensing his presence, Rosie, as the Blackthorn Pack called her, stopped what she was doing. She stood still, her head tilting slightly as though she could feel something, someone watching her. Her violet eyes scanned the dark woods, confusion flickering across her face. There was a faint pull, like a whisper, at the back of her mind, but she couldn't place it. She had never felt anything like it, a strange warmth spreading through her chest. But she saw no one. Rosie shook her head and returned to her task, her thoughts muddled. She had been with Blackthorn Pack for so long, trapped in this life of servitude, that she had long given up on hope. Yet tonight, something was different. There was an energy in the air that made her heart race. She couldn't explain it, but for the first time in years, she felt alive. Damon's heart ached as he watched her, his fists clenching at his sides. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. His mate was supposed to be cherished, loved, and protected. Instead, she was a slave, broken and worn down by years of abuse. The thought made his blood boil. "It's time," Damon growled softly, his voice laced with determination. Jax nodded. His expression was stern as stone. "We're ready, Alpha." Together they stepped out of the shadows, making their way toward the heart of the Blackthorn Pack settlement. As they approached, the guards stiffened, immediately recognizing Damon and his wolves. Whispers spread like wildfire through the pack, the tension rising as they realized who had come to their doorstep. The Alpha of Nightshade Hollow. The pack's leader, Victor Thorne, stood at the center of the compound, his tall, imposing figure framed by the light of the fire burning in the middle of the gathering space. His lieutenants flanked him, his gaze sharp and calculating as Damon approached. "Damon Blackwood," Victor sneered, his lips curling into a mocking smile. "To what do we owe the pleasure of your visit?" Damon's eyes narrowed, his voice cold and authoritative. "I'm here for my mate," he said, pointing to Rosie. A hush fell over the crowd that had gathered around them at his words. Her heart pounding, every eye turned toward Rosie, who stood frozen near the cabin. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. Mate? Her? She was no one. A weak Omega. A slave. Why would a powerful Alpha claim her? Victor's smile faltered momentarily, but he quickly recovered, crossing his arms over his chest. "Your mate? I don't see anyone here who belongs to you, Blackwood." Damon took a step forward, his gaze locked on Victor's. "I'm not asking. She is mine, and I've come to take her home." The crowd around them gasped as the weight of Damon's words sank in. Rosie's mind raced, her heart thudding in her ears. This couldn't be real. It had to be some mistake. But even as the fear and confusion swirled within her, she felt something else, a warmth, a pull toward the stranger who had just claimed her. She didn't understand it, but there was no denying the connection. Victor's eyes darkened, his expression hardening as he realized the seriousness of the situation. Damon Blackwood wasn't just any Alpha. He was one of the most influential leaders in the region. This billionaire controlled vast territories and had influence far beyond the world of wolves. To deny him what he wanted would be a dangerous move. But Victor was not one to back down easily. He couldn't simply hand over one of his pack members, especially not without something in return. "You seem to be under the impression that you can waltz into my territory and take whatever you want," Victor said, his voice laced with a dangerous edge. "But things don't work that way here, Blackwood." Damon's patience was wearing thin. His wolf was pacing inside him, demanding that he assert his dominance and take what was rightfully his. But Damon knew that a fight, though inevitable, wasn't the best option. Yet. "I'm giving you a chance, Victor," Damon said, his voice low and threatening. "You hand her over peacefully. This doesn't have to get ugly." Victor's smile returned, but it was colder now, more calculating. "Peacefully, huh? Well, you see, Blackwood, she may be just a slave here, but she's still part of my pack, and I don't give away my pack members for free." Damon's eyes flashed angrily, but he forced himself to stay calm. He knew this was a negotiation now, and as much as he despised it, he had no choice but to play along. "What do you want?" Damon growled, his voice like gravel. Victor's eyes gleamed with triumph. He had the upper hand, and he knew it. "I want land, a piece of territory, yours, to be precise. You want the girl? Fine, but it's going to cost you." Damon's jaw tightened, the muscles in his neck straining as he fought to control his temper. Victor was playing a dangerous game, and while Damon was willing to negotiate, he would not be manipulated. Before Damon could respond, Rosie stepped forward, her voice trembling but filled with a quiet strength. "I don't understand," she said, her eyes wide and confused. "Why? Why would you want me?" Damon's gaze softened as he looked at her, their bond growing stronger with every passing moment. "Because you're my mate," he said, "and I will not leave without you." Rosie's heart skipped a beat, her mind spinning with the weight of his words. Her mate? The concept was foreign to her, something she had only heard in stories. She had never believed that someone like her, an Omega, weak and unwanted, could have a mate, let alone someone as powerful as Damon Blackwood. But as she looked into his eyes, she felt it. The bond, the connection, the undeniable truth. But Victor's voice cut through the air before she could say another word. Enough. We have a deal to make, Blackwood. I want your land. Damon's eyes darkened, his wolf snarling inside him. This was no longer a negotiation. Victor had crossed a line. There will be no deal, Damon said, his voice deadly calm. She is mine, and if you refuse to let her go, I will tear this pack apart piece by piece. The crowd around them gasped, the weight of Damon's words sinking in. Victor's face twisted with rage, but he knew he was no match for Damon in a fight, not without risking the lives of his pack. Fine, Victor spat, his voice dripping with venom. Take her. But don't think this is over, Blackwood. You'll regret this. Damon still needs to respond. His eyes were locked on Rosie, who stood trembling but resolute. He reached out a hand, his voice gentle but firm. Come with me, he said. Rosie hesitated momentarily before stepping forward, her hand trembling as she placed it in his. When their skin touched, the bond flared to life like a wildfire burning through her soul. She didn't understand it, but she couldn't deny it. She was his, and he was hers. Chapter 5. A New World. The sleek black SUV roared down the long, winding road that led away from Blackthorn Pack, its engine purring with power. In the back seat, Rosie sat stiffly, her hands clenched tightly in her lap, as she stared out the window. The trees blurred past in a sea of green, but her mind was elsewhere, spinning with confusion and disbelief. Everything had changed in a matter of hours. One moment, she was nothing but a slave, a weak Omega, living under the oppressive rule of the Blackthorn Pack. Now she was sitting in a car with Alpha Damon Blackwood, the most powerful alpha in the land, being taken to his estate, her new home, and somehow he claimed that she was his mate. Mate. The word echoed in her mind, a foreign and impossible concept. She couldn't be his mate. She was no one, just a broken, unwanted Omega. How could someone like him, a billionaire alpha with the world at his feet, want someone like her? Rosie's heart raced as they approached the edge of Damon's territory, Nightshade Hollow. The stories she'd heard of his pack had always painted it as something magnificent, a place of wealth, power, and beauty. But nothing could have prepared her for what she saw next. The trees gave way to a sprawling landscape, and Rosie's breath caught in her throat as Damon's estate came into view. It was enormous, like something out of a fairy tale. A massive stone mansion rose from the earth, surrounded by meticulously manicured gardens and vast open fields that stretched as far as the eye could see. The structure itself was regal, with towering turrets and large arched windows that glowed softly in the fading light of dusk. This is your home now. Damon's deep, smooth tone broke through her thoughts, sending a shiver down her spine. Rosie blinked, her wide violet eyes flickering up to meet his. For a moment, she couldn't find her voice. She could only stare in awe as they pulled through the large iron gates that marked the entrance to Nightshade Hollow's pack house. The gates swung open, revealing a driveway that curved elegantly toward the front of the mansion. Several pack members were gathered outside, waiting to greet their alpha. As the car came to a stop, Rosie's heart pounded in her chest. She didn't belong here. This place was too grand, too beautiful. She felt like an imposter, like she would be discovered at any moment and thrown back into the cold, harsh world from which she had come. Damon stepped out of the car, moving with grace and authority, making Rosie's breath hitch. He walked around to her side, opening the door smoothly and extending his hand to her. She hesitated momentarily before placing her small, trembling hand in his. The moment their skin touched, She felt the warmth again, that strange pull she couldn't understand but couldn't deny. "Come," Damon said softly, his gaze intense as he looked down at her. "You're safe here." Rosie swallowed hard and nodded, her throat tight as she exited the car. The cool evening air hit her skin, and she shivered slightly as she glanced around, her eyes wide with awe and fear. The pack members, who had gathered to greet Damon, were all watching her, their expressions a mix of curiosity and respect. Some bowed slightly as Damon passed, a sign of their loyalty to their alpha. "Welcome home, Alpha," one of them said, a tall, broad-shouldered man who looked like he could break a tree in half with his bare hands. His voice was deep, but it was warm as he nodded toward Rosie. "And welcome to you too, Luna." The word Luna sent a jolt through Rosie, and she stiffened, her eyes widening in panic. Luna? She wasn't a Luna. She wasn't anyone special. They had to be mistaken. She opened her mouth to protest, but Damon's hand on her lower back gently urged her forward, and the words died in her throat. The mansion doors swung open as they approached, and Rosie felt her breath catch again. The inside of the estate was just as magnificent as the exterior, if not more so. The grand foyer was bathed in soft, golden light from a massive chandelier hanging high above. Marble floors gleamed beneath her feet, and the walls were adorned with beautiful tapestries and paintings, each one depicting moments of Nightshade Hollow's history. A grand staircase curved up to the second floor, its banister polished to a gleam. Rosie felt small compared to a lost child in a place far too big for her. Her heart raced, her mind whirling with thoughts of inadequacy. How could she live here? How could she possibly fit into this world of wealth and power? Damon's hand lingered on her back, his presence reassuring and overwhelming. She could feel the strength radiating from him, the quiet power that made him the alpha of the most influential pack in the region. But there was something else too, something gentle, almost protective. It was as if he knew how out of place she felt, and was trying, in his way, to make her feel at ease. "Rosie," Damon's voice was quiet, but held the same commanding tone that made others obey without question. "You belong here." His words, spoken with such certainty, stirred something deep within her. She wanted to believe him, to think that she could finally have a place where she was safe and wanted. But the scars of her past, the years of being told she was nothing, clung to her heart like a vice. I don't know how to be here," Rosie whispered, her voice barely audible. Damon turned to her, his dark eyes softening slightly. He reached out, gently taking her chin between his fingers and tilting her face to meet his gaze. His touch was surprisingly tender for someone so powerful. "You don't have to know," he said softly, his thumb brushing lightly across her skin. "I will teach you. All I ask is that you trust me." Rosie's heart thudded in her chest, her gaze locked with his. Something in his eyes made her want to trust him, despite the fear that still gnawed at her insides. But she had never been able to give trust freely, not after everything she had endured. "I'll try," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Damon gave a slight nod, his expression unreadable. He straightened, his hand falling from her face as he turned toward the grand staircase. "Come," he said, his voice again that of the alpha. "I'll show you to our room." "Our room?" The words echoed in her mind. Rosie followed him in silence, her mind still reeling from everything that had happened. As they ascended the staircase, she couldn't help but marvel at the opulence around her. The mansion was like nothing she had ever seen, so grand, so full of life and beauty. It was the polar opposite of the cold, cruel world of Blackthorn Pack. But even as she stepped into this new world, the weight of her past still hung heavily on her shoulders. When they reached the top of the stairs, Damon led her down a long hallway lined with more artwork and ornate furniture. Finally, they stopped in front of a large wooden door. Damon pushed it open, revealing a spacious room that took Rosie's breath away. The room was bathed in soft, golden light from several tall windows that overlooked the vast grounds of the estate. A large, canopied bed sat in the center, draped in rich, deep blues and silver fabrics. A fireplace crackled warmly in one corner, and a small seating area was arranged near the windows. It was the most beautiful room she had ever seen, and for a moment, she couldn't believe she was meant to live in such a lovely room. "This is our room," Damon said, his voice breaking through her thoughts. Rosie stepped inside, her heart pounding as she took in her surroundings. Everything about the room was so luxurious, so far removed from the tiny, cold space she had lived in at Blackthorn Pack. She ran her fingers over the soft fabric of the bedspread, her mind struggling to process the fact that she was no longer a slave, no longer trapped in a life of misery. But as beautiful as the room was, Rosie couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't deserve it. I don't know how to live like this," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You'll learn," Damon replied, stepping closer to her. "You deserve this, Rosie." Rosie shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "No, I don't. I'm nothing. I've never been anything." Damon's expression darkened slightly, and he touched her shoulder. "You are not nothing," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "You are my mate. You are the Luna of this pack, whether you believe it or not, and I will do everything I can to ensure you know your worth." Rosie's heart twisted in her chest at his words. She wanted to believe him, but the doubts ingrained in her for so long were hard to shake. She had been nothing but a slave for most of her life, treated as less than dirt by those who were supposed to be her family. How could she suddenly be worthy of this, of him? Before she could respond, there was a soft knock at the door. Damon turned, his sharp gaze immediately locking onto the figure who entered the room. It was Jack Stone, his beta, his expression grim. "Alpha," Jack said, his voice low. "There's something you need to see." Damon's jaw tightened, and Rosie could feel the shift in his energy. Something was wrong. She could sense the tension that suddenly filled the room like a dark cloud. "Stay here," Damon told Rosie, his voice commanding but gentle. "I'll be back." And with that, he was gone, leaving Rosie alone in the massive room, her heart pounding. What could it be now? And why did the fear creeping back into her chest feel like a shadow from her past? As the door clicked shut behind Damon, Rosie felt a shiver run down her spine. For a brief moment, she could have sworn she heard a whisper, a distant and dark voice calling her name. Enjoying the story so far? Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Chapter 6. The Alpha's Desire. Rosie stood in the middle of the grand bedroom, her heart thumping loudly in her chest. Everything around her was so surreal, so different from the harsh world she had known in the Blackthorn Pack. The soft bedding, the gentle glow of the chandelier, and the warmth of the fireplace, all of it seemed like a dream. But it wasn't. She was in Alpha Damon's mansion, in a room far more luxurious than anything she had ever seen. As her mind whirled, a gentle knock on the door pulled her out of her thoughts. "Miss Rosie," came a soft, respectful voice from the other side. The door creaked open to reveal two women dressed in clean, crisp uniforms. They both bowed slightly before entering, their movements graceful yet humble. "We're here to assist you," one said with a kind smile. "Alpha Damon has instructed us to help you prepare for the evening." Rosie's eyes widened. "Assist me?" "Yes, miss. We've drawn a bath for you and helped you get dressed. It's our honor to serve you." Rosie's heart pounded at the thought. She had never been treated this way in her life. In the Blackthorn Pack, she was nothing more than a slave, forced to do the dirtiest of chores, never once treated with dignity. The idea of someone else helping her, even drawing her a bath, was unimaginable. Her first instinct was to refuse. I can manage alone," she said quickly, stepping back. The servants exchanged glances, but didn't argue. "As you wish," one of them said, bowing her head. "If you need anything, we'll be just outside." Rosie nodded, her chest tightening with anxiety. As soon as they left, she approached the grand bathroom. It was far more significant than she could have ever dreamed. A marble tub sat in the center, surrounded by soft towels and scented candles. The water inside was warm, steam rising lazily from its surface, and it smelled of lavender, a scent she had only smelled once before. As she dipped a hand into the water, memories of her life at Blackthorn surfaced. She barely had time to bathe back there. Her duties consumed her days, and exhaustion left her with no energy by the time she could find a moment for herself. Showers, if she was lucky enough to have one, were quick and cold, sometimes only twice a week, never more than 5 minutes. Her fingers lingered in the water, the warmth soothing her frayed nerves. It was so different. Everything here was. She didn't belong in a place like this. What was she, a lowly Omega, doing in a mansion like this, wearing these clothes, being treated as if she were someone important? It all felt like some elaborate mistake. But Damon had said she was his mate. His Luna. The thought made her stomach twist with nerves and confusion. How could someone like her, weak, insignificant, be the mate of someone like Alpha Damon Blackwood? He was powerful and influential, a billionaire with a pack that adored him, and yet he had chosen her. His gaze had held no doubt, no hesitation. Taking a deep breath, Rosie slowly undressed and stepped into the bath, sinking into the warm water. As she closed her eyes, the soft hum of lavender surrounded her, and her body relaxed for the first time in what felt like forever. She took her time, letting the warmth seep into her bones, scrubbing herself clean, erasing the grime of the Blackthorn Pack from her skin. But even as she washed away the past, the uncertainty of the future weighed heavily on her. Meanwhile, downstairs, Alpha Damon paced back and forth in the grand hall, his brow furrowed with concern. His mind wasn't at ease, not after the day's events. His pack had successfully extracted Rosie from the Blackthorn Pack, but wolves were still out there, wolves that had followed them. Jax, his trusted beta, stood by his side, his arms crossed over his chest. "Our scouts are tracking them," Jax said, his voice steady. "We'll know soon enough who they are." Damon nodded, but his jaw tightened. "Victor can't be trusted," he muttered, his voice a low growl. "He might have agreed to the exchange, but I don't trust him not to retaliate. He won't let this go easily." Jax's eyes darkened. "No, he won't, but we're ready for anything." Damon glanced toward the staircase, his mind shifting to Rosie. She was upstairs, alone in his room, probably confused and scared. He hadn't had the chance to adequately explain things to her yet, about their bond, about what it meant to be his mate. There was so much she needed to know, so much he wanted to tell her. But for now, he had to ensure her safety. Everything else would come later. "Keep me updated on the scouts," Damon said, turning toward the staircase. "I'll be upstairs if you need me." Jax nodded. Understood. As Damon ascended the stairs, his mind raced with thoughts of Rosie. His wolf, Fenrir, stirred within him, restless and eager. His wolf wanted nothing more than to protect her, to make her theirs. Silence greeted him when Damon reached the top of the stairs and stepped into his room. His gaze swept over the space, and panic flared in his chest momentarily. Where was she? His heart pounded as he called out, "Rosie?" No answer. He scanned the room, his eyes narrowing as he searched for any sign of her. But then, he heard it from the bathroom, a soft hum. His panic eased, and his heart slowed as he recognized the sound. Rosie's voice. He approached the bathroom door, his hand hesitating on the handle momentarily. The sound of her humming, soft and melodic, filled the air. She sounded so peaceful, so content, and yet, the vulnerability in her voice tugged at his heart. Slowly, he turned the knob, pushing the door open just enough to peek inside. His breath caught in his throat as he saw her. Rosie was in the bath, her slender frame partially hidden beneath the water, her skin glistening with the soap she was gently lathering onto her body. Her eyes were closed, and her head tilted slightly as she hummed a soft, haunting melody. Damon's heart clenched. She was so beautiful, even in her fragility. The way her fingers moved delicately over her skin, and the quiet peace on her face, stirred something profound within him, something primal and protective. Fenrir growled softly, wanting to move closer, be near her, and claim her. But Damon knew this wasn't the time. She was still adjusting, trying to understand her place in this new world. He would give her time, however much she needed. For now, all he wanted was to protect her, to show her that she was safe. As he stood there, watching her, Rosie suddenly stopped humming. Her eyes fluttered open, and momentarily, she glanced toward the door. Damon froze, his heart thudding in his chest. Had she seen him? Would she be frightened? But Rosie sighed and closed her eyes again, sinking deeper into the water. Damon slowly backed away from the door, his heart heavy with the weight of his emotions. She was his mate, his Luna, and he would do everything he could to show her that she was worth it all. Damon stood just outside the bathroom, his heart hammering in his chest. He had never felt this way, not even with the many women who pursued him. None of them had ever stirred this kind of anticipation or nervousness inside him. But with Rosie, everything was different. She wasn't just another woman. She was his mate, his Luna, and the one destined to stand by his side. Fenrir, his wolf, stirred within him, pacing restlessly in his mind. "I can feel her." Fenrir's voice was a deep rumble, filled with anticipation. "She's ours, Damon, and I can't wait to claim her." Damon swallowed hard, his pulse quickening. "We need to take it slow, Fenrir. She's been through too much." "Slow?" Fenrir scoffed, his voice brimming with impatience. "We've waited long enough. She's right there, Damon. I can practically taste her scent." Damon clenched his fists, trying to steady himself. He couldn't deny the pull he felt toward Rosie. It was primal, an undeniable force that had drawn him to her the moment he saw her. But she wasn't like the other women he'd been with. She was different, delicate, wounded. The Blackthorn Pack had treated her like a slave, stripping away any sense of self-worth she might have had. "She's fragile," Damon reminded Fenrir. "We can't just rush her into this. She's been through too much already. She needs time to adjust." Fenrir growled low in his throat, clearly unhappy with the decision. "Time? Damon, we've waited our whole lives for this. We need an heir, a Luna. The pack needs her as much as we do. She's our mate, and you're holding us back." Damon sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "I know. I want her too, Fenrir, more than anything. But she's not ready. We can't push her. We'll lose her if we do." There was a long pause, as Fenrir mulled over Damon's words. Finally, his voice softened, though the tension was still palpable. "Fine, but don't keep me waiting too long." The bathroom door creaked open just then, and Damon's breath hitched. Rosie stepped out, her cheeks flushed, and her wet hair falling loosely over her shoulders. She was wrapped in a soft, white bathrobe, the material clinging to her damp skin in a way that made Damon's throat dry. His eyes locked onto hers, and the world seemed to stop momentarily. Rosie's gaze flickered with uncertainty, a mix of panic and confusion clouding her delicate features. Her slender fingers gripped the edges of the bathrobe tightly, as if afraid it might fall off. Damon could see the blush creeping up her neck and across her cheeks, and his heart ached at her vulnerability. "Alpha Damon," Rosie's voice was barely above a whisper, her eyes wide as she stood frozen in the doorway. For a brief second, the idea of closing the space between them flashed in his mind. He could reach out, pull her close, and erase the distance between them with a single touch. But he knew better. Rosie wasn't just any woman. This wasn't just any moment. "We can strip her," Fenrir growled inside Damon's mind, pushing forward with lustful urgency. Damon stiffened, shaking his head. "No, Fenrir, she's not that kind of girl. She's different." "Different?" Fenrir sneered. "She's our mate. She's meant to bear our heir. You're holding us back, Damon." Damon clenched his jaw, pushing Fenrir's voice aside. The wolf inside him wanted to claim her and mark her as theirs. But Damon knew Rosie wasn't ready. She barely knew what it meant to be his mate, let alone accept its total weight. "Rosie," Damon finally spoke, his voice softer than intended. "You should. Get dressed. I had the servants prepare everything for you. There's a walk-in closet just next door. They've arranged clothes and everything you might need." Rosie's blush deepened, her gaze dropping to the floor as she nervously tugged at the bathrobe. "Thank you, Alpha Damon," she murmured, her voice barely audible. Damon's heart thudded in his chest as he took a cautious step toward her. "You can call me Damon. There's no need for formalities between us, Rosie." She glanced up at him, her eyes wide with uncertainty. She looked as though she might say something for a moment, but then she quickly nodded, turning her gaze back to the floor. Rosie's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the robe around her body, clearly nervous about being so exposed in front of him. Damon could sense her discomfort, and his protective instincts kicked in. "I'll wait for you in the bedroom," Damon said, stepping back to give her space. "Once you're ready, we can talk. There are things we need to discuss, about us, about what it means to be mates." Rosie's cheeks flushed even more, and Damon could see the confusion flickering across her face. What do mates do? Her innocent thought echoed in the air, though she never spoke the words aloud. He turned away, giving her the privacy she desperately needed, and left the room. Fenrir's voice rumbled in the back of his mind as he walked toward the living room. "You're holding us back, Damon. She's ours. She's ready." "She's not ready, Fenrir," Damon replied sharply. "And we're not just going to take her. She deserves better than that." Fenrir growled, clearly frustrated. "We'll have to claim her soon, Damon. You know that as well as I do. The pack needs an heir, and we need her." Damon let out a heavy sigh. "I know, but it has to be when she's ready. I won't force her." Fenrir fell silent, though the tension between them still simmered. Damon could feel his wolf's desire burning beneath the surface, but he wouldn't let it control him. Rosie was his, but she was more than just a mate or a vessel for an heir. She was a person, someone who had suffered, who the Blackthorn Pack had broken, and who needed time to heal. Rosie stood frozen in the middle of the room for a few moments after Damon left, her heart racing. How he looked at her made her skin tingle and her heart pound in a way she couldn't quite understand. There was something about him, something primal and powerful, that both frightened and intrigued her. Her cheeks burned with the memory of his intense gaze, and she quickly rushed toward the walk-in closet he had mentioned. As she opened the door, her breath caught in her throat. The closet was massive, more significant than any room she had ever lived in. Rows of dresses, shoes, and accessories lined the walls, neatly arranged as though waiting for her. Everything was beautiful, too beautiful for someone like her. The fabrics were soft, delicate, and far too expensive for someone who had spent her life in rags. Her hands trembled as she reached for one of the simple but elegant dresses, running her fingers over the soft material. It felt like a dream, like she had somehow stumbled into a life that didn't belong to her. But Damon had said this was hers. Why? She wondered. Why does he care so much? As Rosie dressed, her thoughts kept circling back to Damon's words. He had said they were mates, that they needed to discuss things. But what did that mean? What did mates do, and why did the thought of it make her heart race? Chapter 7. Claim Her. Rosie stood before the massive mirror, her fingers trembling as she touched the delicate silk nightdress. The thought of Damon, her mate, waiting for her outside sent a shiver down her spine. She barely knew him, yet their connection felt undeniable, a rope pulling her toward him. Rosie caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror, her hair still damp from the bath, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't look like the broken girl she once was. She looked different, new. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door, her eyes immediately finding Damon waiting for her. He stood tall, his broad shoulders casting shadows against the dim light. His beautiful eyes flicked toward her, softening as he saw her appearance. A warmth spread through her, a fluttering sensation in her stomach that she didn't recognize. "Come, sit," Damon said, his voice deep and steady, but an underlying gentleness made Rosie's heart race. She walked hesitantly toward him, feeling the weight of his gaze on her every step. Damon motioned for her to sit beside him on the edge of the couch near the fireplace. As she sat down, her legs tucked nervously beneath her, she couldn't help but notice how close they were, how her arm almost brushed his. "I know all of this is overwhelming for you," Damon began, his voice soothing. "But I want you to know, this is your home now. Nightshade Hollow is your pack." Rosie's heart skipped a beat. Her pack? She had never belonged anywhere, let alone to a powerful, respected group like this. It didn't feel real. "As my mate," Damon continued, "everything I own is yours. The pack will respect you, and I will protect you." His eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, the intensity of his gaze made her forget to breathe. "The bond we share is sacred, Rosie, but I won't rush you. The marking can wait until you're ready." The word marking made her pulse quicken. She had heard about it, a deep connection between mates, something permanent, binding. Was she ready for something so profound? And yet, the way Damon spoke to her with such care made the idea less terrifying. "I'll have someone show you around tomorrow," he added, his tone softening even more. "This place is vast, and I want you to feel comfortable, to see what life is like here." Rosie nodded, but she wasn't listening anymore. Her mind was swimming with everything she had been holding in. Her entire life had been bleak, confined to the harsh walls of Blackthorn. But now, being here with Damon, it felt like she had stepped into another world where she could hope and imagine a future. Her eyes drifted to Damon's face, studying him in a way she hadn't before. He was beautiful in a way she had never seen before. Sharp, strong features softened by the kindness in his gaze. The butterflies in her stomach intensified. How was this man her mate? It didn't seem possible. "Rosie?" His voice snapped her back to the present, and she realized he had been speaking, but she hadn't heard a word. Embarrassed, she blushed, looking away. Rosie bit her lip, unsure of what to say. Damon watched as Rosie shifted nervously in her seat, her eyes darting around the room, as though she wasn't sure if she belonged. And maybe she didn't feel like she did. Not yet, anyway. The hesitation and fear in her gaze were impossible to miss, and it tore at him in ways he hadn't expected. What kind of hell had she endured in the Blackthorn Pack that had left her so fragile and uncertain of her worth? Damon clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. The mere thought of what she must have gone through filled him with rage. He could feel Fenrir pacing restlessly in his mind, sharing his anger and need for retribution. "We'll avenge her soon," Damon whispered, though his voice was more of a promise to himself than anyone else. He couldn't afford to act rashly, but the need to protect Rosie, to make those who had hurt her suffer, burned in his chest. For now, though, Rosie needed peace. She needed to feel safe. Damon took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. He had to be patient with her, no matter how much he wanted to claim her, to show her what it meant to be genuinely cared for. "You should rest," he said softly, his voice low. "I'll be back soon." Rosie looked up at him, uncertainty clouding her eyes, but she nodded. Damon's room, now her room, was a place of safety, a sanctuary where she could begin to heal. He would make sure of it. "I'm not going far," Damon reassured her. "Just need to handle some things. You'll be safe here." Without waiting for her response, he turned and left the room. When the door closed behind him, Damon felt the fire in his chest ignite again. He stalked down the hallway, his mind swirling with the anger he had forced himself to hold back in Rosie's presence. His beta, Jax, was waiting for him outside, standing at attention sternly. "Alpha," Jax greeted him with a curt nod. "Any updates?" Damon asked, his voice clipped and sharp. Jax's jaw tightened before he responded. "Yes, Alpha. Our pack fighters caught 5 intruders near the border. They're being held in our cells now, but not from the Blackthorn Pack. Damon's eyes narrowed. Not Blackthorn? He had been expecting a move from Victor Thorne's pack after they took Rosie, but this was unexpected. No, Alpha, we haven't identified them yet, but their insignia doesn't match any pack in the region. They've been uncooperative so far. Damon crossed his arms, his mind racing. Who would have the nerve to invade his territory if not Blackthorn? The question gnawed at him, but there was no time to dwell on it. Rosie's safety was his top priority, and he couldn't afford to be blindsided by another enemy. Keep them under lock and key, Damon ordered. No one comes near them until we know exactly who they are and why they were here. If their pack comes to claim them, be merciless if necessary. We can't take any risks. Jax nodded, his expression grim. Understood, Alpha. I'll make sure our fighters are ready for anything. Damon's gaze darkened as he stared off into the distance. Whoever had dared step into his territory would pay. He would make sure of that. And if they had anything to do with Rosie's past, if they were even remotely connected to Blackthorn, he wouldn't hesitate to destroy them. For now, though, he had to keep a level head. Rosie needed him calm, not consumed by vengeance. He exhaled sharply, trying to shake off the tension in his shoulders. I'm going back inside, he said, his voice quieter now, though the anger still simmered beneath the surface. Keep me informed of any developments. Yes, Alpha, Jax replied, before turning to carry out his orders. Damon headed back toward the house, his thoughts returning to Rosie. The image of her, sitting on the edge of his bed, lost and unsure, lingered in his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling of how small and fragile she seemed, compared to the vastness of his world. As he neared the room, Damon paused, his hand hovering over the door handle. He took a deep breath, trying to quell his desire since he had seen her. Fenrir was restless, eager to claim and mark her as theirs, but Damon knew they had to take things slow. Rosie wasn't like anyone else. She needed time. Be patient, Damon told Fenrir. Fenrir growled softly in response, his voice a low rumble in Damon's mind. She's ours. We can protect her. She belongs with us. I know, Damon replied, forcing himself to keep control. But we can't rush this. She's been through enough. She needs to trust us first. Fenrir huffed, frustrated but relenting. Fine, but don't make me wait too long. We need her. Damon smirked slightly, though his heart was still heavy. They needed Rosie, but he wanted her to want them more than that, to feel safe and loved. That was what mattered most. He opened the door quietly, stepping back into Rosie's room. He stood there for a moment, watching her. Even in sleep, she looked tense, as though the weight of her past still clung to her. Damon's jaw clenched. He would free her from that, no matter what it took. Chapter 8. A New Life, a New Fear. The morning Rosie woke in Nightshade Hollow, the world felt too large for her. Sunlight slipped through tall glass windows she had never seen the night before, painting gold across polished floors and velvet drapes. The room smelled faintly of cedar, lavender, and something deeper, wolf musk threaded with pine and rain. Damon's scent lingered there, calm and steady, like a promise she didn't know how to hold. She sat on the edge of the enormous bed, fingers twisting into the silk blanket, and tried to understand how she had come from cracked floors and cold porridge to this. A knock came. "Luna Rosie?" a gentle voice asked. Rosie's heart jumped at the title. Luna. The word still felt like a coat too big for her shoulders. "Come in," she said softly. 3 Omegas stepped inside, smiling warmly. One carried fresh milk and coffee, which she could choose from. Another held a tray of fruit and warm bread. The third bowed slightly. "Alpha Damon asked us to show you the territory today," she said, "if you're feeling up to it." Rosie swallowed her nerves. "I would like that." And so her new life began, not with ceremony or crowns, but with laughter echoing through forest paths. Nightshade Hollow stretched farther than Rosie could imagine. Towering pine trees lined winding trails, their branches whispering secrets in the wind. Streams glittered under the sunlight. Cabins sat tucked among moss-covered rocks, smoke curling lazily into the sky. Children chased each other through fields of wildflowers, their giggles light as birdsong. Rosie noticed every little thing, unlike when she was in the Blackthorn Pack, when there was no time for her to savor the greens surrounding the territory. She didn't even appreciate the laughter of the small children. In the Nightshade Hollow Pack, she stared like someone seeing color for the first time. The Omegas showed her everything. The children, they look happy and free, carrying no problem, Rosie said, as she looked at them adorably. As they should, one of the Omegas said. Rosie pressed her lips, reliving her childhood memories. Her childhood was stolen from her. She never got the chance to play on the ground with other children. Perhaps Alpha Damon wasn't so bad at all. He seemed like an alpha who truly cares for his pack. The Omegas showed her the healing lodge, where herbs hung from beams in fragrant bundles. They showed her the training grounds, where warriors sparred with focused grace. They showed her the moonlit lake, where the pack gathered during full moons, its surface smooth as glass. Rosie laughed more than she had in years. She slipped off her shoes to feel cool grass beneath her feet. She helped an Omega pick berries. She watched pups play, her heart aching with something soft and hopeful she didn't dare name. Yet every joy carried a shadow. Because every building was strong, every path was clean, every meal was warm, every wolf walked with pride. At one point, Rosie stopped beside a wide stone bridge overlooking the valley. Below, Nightshade Hollow stretched like a dream, cabins glowing gold, smoke curling into the blue sky, wolves moving like threads in a living tapestry. "It's beautiful," Rosie breathed. "It's home," said Mira, one of the Omegas, smiling. Rosie's chest tightened. "I don't know if I deserve a home like this." The Omegas froze. Mira stepped closer. "You deserve more than this, Luna Rosie." Rosie shook her head. "I was an Omega who couldn't even protect her own scent. I was nothing." "You are Alpha Damon's mate," another Omega said firmly. "And you are kind. That matters more than rank." Rosie tried to believe her. But every time she thought of Damon, the powerful alpha who commanded respect with a glance, her stomach twisted. How could someone like him be attracted to someone like her? Still, when Damon looked at her, his eyes softened like twilight over calm water, and she felt pulled toward him like gravity. They returned to the pack house by afternoon, cheeks flushed and hands sticky with berry juice. Rosie's laughter echoed in the grand hallway before she could stop herself. For a moment, she felt a sense of lightness. Then the whispers began. At first, they were quiet, barely breaths between wolves standing near the hearth. "That's her. She smells familiar. Impossible." Rosie tried not to hear. She smiled politely as wolves bowed to her, offering food, asking gentle questions. Most were kind, truly kind. They welcomed her with warm eyes and soft words. Some offered her small gifts, a woven bracelet, a carved wooden charm, fresh honey wrapped in leaves. Rosie's throat ached with gratitude, yet the whispers threaded through the air like cold wind. Familiar scent, too familiar. She tried to ignore the unease crawling up her spine. At dinner, Damon sat beside her, his shoulder warm against hers. His presence steadied her, soothing her nerves. "Did you enjoy the tour?" Damon asked quietly. Rosie nodded. "Your home is incredible." "Our home," Damon corrected softly. Her heart stumbled. Rosie lowered her gaze. "I'm still learning how to belong." Damon's hand covered hers under the table. Firm, reassuring, "You already do." She wanted to believe him. Across the hall, warriors laughed loudly. Pups begged for stories. Elders debated loudly about fishing routes. It was noisy, warm, and alive. Rosie felt like she was standing in sunlight after years underground. But something wasn't right. A warrior passed behind her and froze mid-step. Another Omega sniffed the air and frowned. An older she-wolf narrowed her eyes before quickly looking away. Rosie's fingers tightened around her cup. She smelled wrong. Her scent wasn't just lavender and wild honey anymore. Damon's pine musk mingled with it. Fenrir's strength wrapped around her wolf. But beneath it, something else lingered. Something she didn't recognize. After dinner, Damon was called away by Beta Jax for patrol reports. Rosie stayed behind with the Omegas, helping clear dishes despite their protests. "You don't have to, Luna," Mira said. "I want to," Rosie insisted. She needed to feel useful, needed to feel like she wasn't just a decoration in Damon's grand life. They laughed while stacking plates, telling stories about clumsy warriors and mischievous pups. Rosie found herself relaxing again, warmth blooming in her chest, until the door opened. An older wolf entered, tall, stern, her hair streaked with silver. She was one of the pack's healers. Rosie remembered being introduced to her earlier, Elder Sarah. Sarah stopped when she smelled Rosie, completely stopped. The tray in her hands tilted slightly before she caught it. Her eyes widened, not in surprise, but in recognition. Shock flickered across her face, then fear. Rosie's smile faded. "Is something wrong?" Sarah didn't answer. The room grew quiet. The Omegas looked between them nervously. Sarah stepped closer, sniffing the air again. Her hands trembled. Her lips parted as if to speak, then closed. "You," she whispered. Rosie's heart pounded. "Me?" Sarah's gaze darted toward the door, toward the hallway where Damon had gone, then back to Rosie. "Your scent," Sarah said hoarsely. "Where did you grow up?" Rosie blinked. "In the outskirts of Blackthorn territory." "Why?" Sarah went pale. A plate slipped from an Omega's hands and shattered on the floor. No one moved. Sarah whispered something so soft, Rosie almost didn't hear it. "It can't be." Rosie's chest tightened. "Please, what's wrong?" Sarah stared at her, like she was seeing a ghost, like she was looking at someone long buried. Then she stepped back suddenly, as if burned. "I need to speak with Alpha Damon," she said sharply. "Now." Rosie's heart sank. Fear crept into her bones like winter frost. What did her scent remind them of? Why did they look at her like she was danger wrapped in silk? The Omegas tried to comfort her, but their smiles were strained now. Their laughter is gone. Their eyes avoided hers. Rosie stood alone in the grand kitchen, surrounded by warmth that suddenly felt cold. Somewhere down the hall, Damon's voice echoed faintly. And Elder Sarah hurried toward him with trembling hands, carrying a secret Rosie didn't know she was born with. Something from the past, something that smelled like her, something that could shatter everything. Rosie pressed her hand to her chest, trying to breathe. She wondered if she truly belonged there, or if her scent had followed her to destroy the only home she had ever wanted. Chapter 9. The Stolen Heir. Inside the grand estate, Alpha Damon stood at the tall glass window of his study, his hands clasped behind his back, jaw tight as stone. Jack Stone waited silently beside him, sensing the storm brewing beneath his Alpha's calm exterior. "Tell me again," Damon said, voice low but sharp as a blade. "Every detail." Jax inhaled slowly. "We interrogated the 5 wolves we caught near the border. They aren't Blackthorn. Their markings, their scent, none of it matches Victor Thorn's pack." Damon turned, his dark eyes glinting in the moonlight. "Then who are they?" Jax hesitated. That alone was enough to make Damon's wolf stir uneasily inside him. Fenrir growled softly in his mind. "Dangerous. Old danger. Their scent is ancient," Jax said at last. "Older than any pack in this region. We had Elder Rowan examine them. He nearly fainted." Damon's brow furrowed. "Speak plainly, Beta." Jax swallowed. "They belong to the Ashen Crest Pack." The name struck the room like thunder. Damon's chest tightened. The Ashen Crest Pack had been wiped out decades ago, in a bloody war no one spoke of anymore. A cursed pack. A fallen bloodline. Ghosts. Impossible, Damon said quietly. That's what we thought, Jax replied, but their scent doesn't lie. They said they'd been searching, for years. Fenrir's growl deepened. They seek our Luna. Damon's eyes darkened. What do they want? Jax hesitated again. Alpha, they refuse to say. Not clearly. They keep repeating one thing. Damon stepped closer. What thing? Jax's voice lowered. They said they finally found her. Silence swallowed the room. For a moment, Damon could only hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Her. Rosie. Fenrir snarled violently. No one touches her. Damon's fists clenched. Lock them deeper in the dungeon, he ordered. No one sees them, no one speaks to them except you and Rowan. Yes, Alpha. Damon's gaze softened suddenly, drifting toward the staircase that led to his chambers. Toward Rosie. And Jax? Yes? Rosie must not know about this. Jax nodded immediately. Of course. But inside Damon, fear twisted like poison. Because for the first time since finding his mate, he wasn't sure the past would stay buried. Rosie sat on the balcony of Damon's room, wrapped in a silk shawl too soft for her to believe it was real. Fireflies blinked across the garden below like scattered stars. She should have felt safe. She should have felt happy. But something inside her trembled. Her fingers clutched the railing as memories flickered through her mind. A burning house. A woman screaming. A lullaby she somehow knew but didn't remember learning. A voice whispering, "Run, little star, run." Rosie gasped and pressed her hands to her temples. Rosie? She turned. Damon stood in the doorway, worry etched across his handsome face. He walked toward her slowly, as if approaching a frightened animal. His large hand reached out, hesitated, then gently brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. The warmth of his touch sent a shiver through her entire body. "You look pale," he said softly. "What's wrong?" Rosie tried to smile. "Just strange dreams." Fenrir stirred happily inside Damon. "Our Luna needs comfort." Damon bent to her level. "Tell me," he said. Rosie swallowed. "I saw flames, and a woman singing to me. I don't know her, but I felt like I loved her." Damon's heart lurched. He wanted to tell her everything. About the captured wolves, about Ashen Crest, about the danger circling her like vultures. But fear held him back. Not yet. She has suffered enough, Fenrir agreed quietly. Protect her heart first. Damon took Rosie's hands in his voice gentler than she had ever heard it. "You are safe here," he whispered. "No one will hurt you again. I swear it." Rosie looked into his eyes and felt something inside her melt. He was terrifying, powerful, a billionaire alpha whose name alone made packs bow. Yet with her, he was careful, patient, tender. Her heart fluttered painfully. "Why are you so kind to me?" she asked suddenly. "I'm nothing, just a slave." Damon's expression hardened. "Never say that again," he said, voice shaking with anger and hurt. "You are my mate, my Luna, the most precious thing in my life." Rosie's breath caught. The way he said it, like truth carved in stone. Tears filled her eyes. "I don't deserve you." Damon lifted her chin gently. "You deserve the world, and I intend to give it to you." She leaned into him before she could stop herself. For a moment, they breathed together. His arms wrapped around her, careful but strong, and Rosie realized she had never felt this safe in her life. Fenrir purred contentedly. "Our Luna." Damon closed his eyes, burying his face in her hair. "Mine." But fear still gnawed at him, because somewhere beneath her sweet scent, there was another scent. Faint, ancient, hidden, and he didn't understand it yet. Later that night, Rosie slept curled beside him, her fingers gripping his shirt as if afraid he would disappear. Damon lay awake, watching her face in the moonlight. So beautiful, so fragile, and someone out there was hunting her. A knock came quietly at the door. Damon slipped out of bed and opened it. Jax stood there, grim-faced. "They're talking," Jax whispered. "You need to hear this." Damon glanced back at Rosie, then nodded. The dungeon smelled of iron and damp stone. The 5 captured wolves sat chained against the wall, their eyes glowing with hatred. One of them smiled when Damon entered. "Alpha Damon," he rasped. "Took you long enough." Damon's presence filled the room like thunder. Even chained, the wolves flinched under his dominance. Fenrir's power surged through him. "Kneel!" The wolves bowed their heads involuntarily. Damon stepped closer. "Who are you?" The wolf laughed. "Ghosts, survivors. Of Ashen Crest," Damon said. The wolf's grin widened. "So you know." Damon's patience snapped. He grabbed the wolf by the collar and lifted him off the ground. "Why were you near my mate?" he snarled. The dungeon fell silent. The wolf's eyes gleamed with cruel triumph. "Because she is ours," Fenrir roared in Damon's mind. Damon slammed him into the wall. "Lie again and you die." The wolf coughed, laughing through blood. "You don't understand, Alpha. She was stolen from us, hidden, raised as a slave so no one would find her." Damon froze. Jax stiffened beside him. The wolf's grin turned savage. "We finally found her," he hissed. "The stolen heir lives." The words echoed through the dungeon like a curse. Damon's blood ran cold. He tightened his grip. "What heir? Heir to what?" The wolf only laughed harder. "You'll see," he whispered, "when the truth wakes inside her." Damon released him slowly, his mind spinning. Rosie, an heir, to a pack thought dead? What did that mean for her? For them? For Nightshade Hollow? Fenrir growled darkly. "The past is coming." Damon turned away, his face pale but determined. No matter who Rosie was, she was his. And he would protect her from the world if he had to burn it down. Back in his room, Rosie stirred in her sleep. "Mama, don't go." Damon froze at the doorway. Tears slid down her cheeks as she whispered a name he had never heard before. Ashen. Damon's heart dropped into darkness. Because he finally understood. And if the captured wolves were telling the truth, then Rosie wasn't just his mate. She was the last princess of a murdered pack. And the war that destroyed her family was about to begin again. Behind him, Fenrir whispered one terrifying thought. "They are coming for their queen." Damon's eyes snapped open in horror. Chapter 10. Moonlight Between Mates. The night in Nightshade Hollow was softer than Rosie had ever known. There were no shouted orders, no slammed doors, no cold stone floors biting into her knees as punishment, no chains of expectation tightening around her throat. Only the distant whisper of the forest wind and the warm, steady presence of Alpha Damon Blackwood beside her. Rosie stood on the balcony of Damon's private wing, fingers curled nervously around the carved railing. Below them, lanterns glowed like fallen stars across the massive estate. Wolves laughed near the bonfire pits. Somewhere in the distance, someone played a violin, the sound floating through the trees like a lullaby. She swallowed hard. "It feels unreal," she whispered. "Do I really belong here?" Damon watched her quietly. He had removed his jacket, his sleeves rolled up, revealing strong forearms dusted with dark hair. The powerful Alpha who ruled companies, cities, and wolves alike looked softer tonight, his expression careful, patient. "You're safe here," he said gently. "You don't have to be afraid anymore. You belong here," he assured. Rosie's fingers tightened. "I don't know how to stop being afraid." Damon's chest tightened painfully at her words. He stepped closer but slowly, giving her time. Always giving her time. "Then we'll learn together," he said. "One small step at a time." Rosie turned to look at him, and her breath caught. She had seen handsome men before from afar, visiting alphas who came to mock Blackthorn Pack. But none had ever looked like Damon, not just his sharp jaw, his piercing dark eyes, or the quiet authority in his posture. It was the way he looked at her, as if she mattered, as if she were fragile and precious at the same time. Butterflies swarmed wildly in her stomach. She pressed a hand against it, confused by the strange warmth blooming inside her. Was this what mates felt? Fenrir stirred in Damon's mind, pleased. She looks at us like the moon looks at the sea. Damon exhaled slowly. Easy. She's still scared. Fenrir rumbled softly. She trusts us more tonight. Rosie cleared her throat. You didn't have to do all of this. For me. Damon frowned. Everything I have is yours. I meant what I said. Her eyes widened. Why? The question cut him deeper. Because you're my mate, he said simply. Because you deserve it. Her gaze dropped immediately. I don't deserve anything. Damon moved without thinking. He lifted her chin with 2 fingers, careful, reverent. I already told you. Never say that again. Rosie froze at the command, the alpha's authority slipping through his voice, but his touch was gentle, so gentle she trembled. You survived hell, Damon whispered. That makes you strong. Tears filled her eyes. I was weak. I couldn't fight them. You stayed kind, Damon said. That's harder than fighting. She stared at him, as if seeing him for the first time. No one had ever said something like that to her. No one had ever defended her heart. The silence stretched between them, thick with emotion. Then Rosie surprised herself. She stepped closer. Damon went still, afraid even breathing too hard would scare her away. Her small hand hovered before resting against his chest. She gasped softly at the steady thud of his heartbeat beneath her palm. You're real, she whispered. You're not a dream. Damon's hand covered hers, warmth spreading between them like fire catching dry leaves. I'm real, he murmured, and I'm not going anywhere. Fenrir hummed with approval. For a moment, Rosie listened to his heartbeat. Then she closed her eyes, and something inside her stirred. A flicker of warmth spread through her chest, down her arms, into her fingertips. Damon stiffened as a faint glow shimmered across Rosie's skin, barely visible, like moonlight caught in mist. Fenrir growled softly. Her wolf. It's waking. Damon didn't move. Rosie? She blinked in confusion. I feel strange. The glow vanished. Rosie swayed, and Damon caught her instantly, pulling her into his arms. She fit against him as if she had always belonged there. Her face flushed as she realized how close they were. I'm sorry, she stammered. I didn't mean... Don't apologize, Damon said hoarsely. Not for needing me. She froze at the words, needing him. The truth of it made her heart race. They stood there, tangled in silence, until Rosie whispered, Can we walk? Damon nodded immediately as he smirked. Anywhere you want. They walked into the moonlit garden, roses blooming pale silver under the night sky. Rosie ran her fingers across petals, laughing softly when dew clung to her skin. I've never seen this many flowers, she said. At Blackthorn, they burned anything that wasn't useful. Damon's jaw tightened. Rosie looked up quickly. I'm sorry. I shouldn't talk about it. You can tell me anything, he said. She hesitated, then spoke. She told him about carrying firewood until her hands bled, about eating last, sleeping on cold floors, and being called worthless every day of her life. Damon listened silently, fists clenched behind his back so she wouldn't see his rage. He understood Rosie's very low self-esteem. All the people around her saw her as worthless. When she finished, he said quietly, I will never let anyone hurt you again. Rosie believed him. That scared her more than anything. She looked up at the sky. What if I disappoint you? Damon stepped behind her, wrapping his arms loosely around her shoulders. You couldn't, he said. You already saved me. She turned in surprise. Saved you? I was empty, Damon admitted. Power, money, control. None of it mattered without you. Her cheeks turned red. You don't even know me. I know enough, he said softly. Their eyes met. The world fell away. Rosie's breath trembled. Can I ask you something? Anything. Will it hurt when you mark me? Damon stilled. His wolf surged forward possessively, but Damon held him back with iron will. Only if you're afraid, Damon said gently. And we won't do anything until you're ready." Rosie nodded, relief flooding her face. She leaned her forehead against his chest. Damon froze. Fenrir whispered, "She trusts us." Damon closed his eyes. "Thank the moon." Rosie inhaled slowly. His scent wrapped around her like a blanket. Cedar, smoke, and something warm and wild. "I like your smell," she said shyly. Damon laughed softly. "That's a good sign," she giggled, surprised by her own sound. It was the first real laugh of her life. The air shifted. A sudden spark danced across her skin again, brighter this time. The roses nearest her glowed faintly, petals trembling as if greeting her. Damon stared in awe. "Rosie, look." She turned and gasped as a single rose bloomed in her palm. "I didn't do that," she whispered, but she had. Fenrir growled softly. "She's stronger than we thought." Damon smiled slowly. "You're amazing," he said. Tears slipped down Rosie's cheeks. "I'm scared." "Then be scared with me," Damon said, brushing her tears away. "You don't have to be brave alone." She nodded and leaned up. Their lips almost touched. A howl shattered the night. Damon's head snapped toward the forest. His eyes blazed gold. "Danger," Fenrir roared. "Enemies." Jax's voice echoed through the bond. "Alpha, the prisoners are screaming." They're saying the same thing again and again. Damon's arms tightened around Rosie instinctively. "Stay here," he said. But Rosie clutched his shirt. "Don't go." His heart broke. Then the wind carried the prisoners' distant cries across the estate. "We found her. The stolen heir lives." Rosie froze. Her heart stopped. "Who are they talking about?" she whispered. Damon had no answer. And somewhere deep inside Rosie's chest, something ancient awakened. Enjoying the story so far? Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Chapter 11. The Scent of Ash and Moonlight. Rosie's fingers tightened around Damon's shirt, her knuckles pale. The words the prisoners shouted refused to leave her ears. "The stolen heir lives." Her heartbeat thundered so loudly she thought Damon could hear it. Maybe he could. His arms had tightened around her, as if he could shield her from words alone. "You're safe," Damon murmured, though his own voice carried tension. "Whatever this is, I will handle it." But Rosie shook her head slowly. "They were talking about me, weren't they?" Damon didn't answer immediately, because for the first time since finding her, Alpha Damon Blackwood didn't know how to protect his mate from the truth. Fenrir paced restlessly in his mind. "Tell her nothing until we know everything. She is fragile." Damon replied silently. "She is stronger than you think." Fenrir's growl softened. "She is ours. That makes her strong." Damon exhaled slowly. "We need to speak with Jax," he said at last, "but not tonight." Rosie nodded, though uncertainty still trembled inside her chest. That night, sleep did not come easily. Rosie dreamed of fire, of wolves howling beneath burning trees, of arms lifting her as a child, while screams tore the night apart. A woman's voice whispered into her ear, desperate and broken. "Hide her. They must not find her." She woke gasping, clutching the sheets. Damon was instantly awake beside her. He sat up, pulling her gently into his arms. "Rosie, what happened?" She pressed her face into his chest, trembling. "I saw flames, wolves, someone is crying." Damon stroked her hair slowly. "Just dreams," he whispered, though his heart was anything but calm. The next morning, Damon met Jax in the strategy hall. Why would they come now? "For so many years, we haven't heard about Ashen Crest." "Why now?" Damon asked. Jax hesitated. "Because they smelled her, Alpha." Damon frowned. "Rosie isn't marked." "No," Jax said, "but she was claimed." Damon stilled. Jax continued, voice low. "When you declared her your mate in front of Victor Thorne, when Fenrir answered, when your wolf recognized her, that released a mating call into the bloodline." Damon's breath caught. "Because in werewolf lore, a fated mate bond did not need teeth and skin. It lived in the soul. When an alpha found his true mate, his wolf howled through instinct and power, a call only ancient bloodlines could recognize. Rosie's hidden heritage had been silent for years, weak, suppressed. But the moment Damon found her, her blood woke, and Ashen Crest wolves had smelled their lost heir across the land. They claim Luna Rosie is their lost alpha heir, kidnapped during the massacre, sold into Blackthorn slavery to hide her identity. Silence fell heavily between them. Damon's hand slammed onto the table. Victor knew. Most likely, Jax said, but he kept her weak. If her wolf awakened, the truth would come out. Rosie will know. Fenrir snarled inside Damon. Kill them all. Damon closed his eyes briefly. Not yet. Inside the room, Rosie stirred. She pressed her hand to her chest. Something warm pulsed there, new and alive. She didn't understand it, but it felt like a sense of belonging. She sat up slowly, wrapping Damon's oversized shirt around herself. Alpha Damon's scent calmed her. She stepped onto the balcony where Alpha Damon was standing. Damon turned instantly. Rosie, he said gently. She looked at him, eyes shining with worry. Tell me the truth. Who were those wolves? Damon hesitated. Fenrir growled inside him. She deserves honesty. Damon exhaled. They believe you belong to an ancient pack called Ashen Crest. Rosie blinked. I don't, she whispered. I was born in Blackthorn. Damon stepped closer. Maybe not. Her knees almost gave out. He caught her immediately. Rosie's fingers clutched his shirt. I don't remember anything else. You were very young, Damon said softly, and Victor Thorne would never tell you the truth. Rosie trembled. Why would anyone hide me? Damon looked into her eyes. Because you were important. She stared at him like he'd spoken another language. No one had ever called her important before. Growing up, wolves would always tell her that she was weak and worthless. The next morning, Rosie made a decision. I want to train, she told Damon. He frowned. You don't have to. I know, she said quietly, but I want to. Damon studied her face. She looked scared, but determined. Fenrir rumbled approvingly. Our Luna is rising, so Damon nodded. The training field buzzed with curious wolves. An Omega who had lived as a slave now stood holding a wooden blade. Her hands shook, but her eyes did not leave Jax. Show me again, she said. Jax smiled gently. Feet apart. Balance. Rosie tried. She stumbled. She tried again. Sweat gathered on her brow. Damon watched from the sidelines, pride swelling painfully in his chest. She was trying. For him. For herself. For the life she never thought she deserved. Rosie swung the blade again, and the air shimmered. A silver glow flickered across her hands. The training wolves gasped. Damon froze. Fenrir surged forward. Her wolf! Rosie stared at her fingers. What? Was that? Jax whispered. Your wolf is waking. Rosie's breath caught. I don't have a wolf, she said automatically, the lie she had been told all her life. But inside her chest, something answered. A small, shy presence. Curious, lonely, waiting. Rosie dropped the blade and pressed her hand over her heart. Damon stepped forward slowly. You do, he said gently. She's just been sleeping. Tears filled Rosie's eyes. Because I was weak? No, Damon said firmly. Because someone suppressed her. Fenrir's voice echoed warmly. She hears us. Rosie looked at Damon suddenly. I feel warm when I'm near you. He smiled softly. That's the mate bond. She blushed furiously, but she didn't step away. Training continued. Day after day, Rosie learned how to stand, block, and breathe. Every small victory made her smile brighter. Every mistake made Damon's chest ache with pride. And every night, her scent grew stronger, wilder, ancient. One evening, she accidentally snapped a training staff in half. She gasped. I'm sorry. Damon laughed. You're terrifying. She laughed too. And it was the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. Fenrir purred. She is ours. Later that night, Damon found her sitting by the window, watching the moon. "You were brave today," he said quietly. Rosie smiled. "I wasn't brave. I was trying." He sat beside her. "That's the same thing." She leaned her head on his shoulder. Damon froze, then slowly wrapped his arm around her. Fenrir purred softly. "She is ours." Rosie whispered, "Do you think I'll ever be strong like your pack?" Damon kissed her hair gently. "You already are." She closed her eyes, letting herself believe him. For the first time in her life, Rosie felt like she belonged. Meanwhile, in the dungeon below, one of the prisoners smiled through broken teeth and whispered to the guard, "Tell the Alpha, the ones who destroyed Ashen Crest are coming for her again." The guard ran to Alpha Damon, and Damon realized with horror, this wasn't just about Rosie's past, it was about a war that had never ended. Rosie heard the guard, and for the first time in her life, her wolf growled. Chapter 12. The Luna Shifted. Damon froze the moment he heard it. It wasn't just a growl, it was hers. Low, raw, ancient. The sound rolled across the battlefield like distant thunder, powerful and protective, vibrating straight through her chest and into Fenrir's soul. Fenrir went utterly still. "Mate," his wolf breathed in awe. Damon's heart slammed against his ribs. He had imagined this moment, dreamed of it, but nothing prepared him for the reality of hearing Rosie's wolf claim her place in the world. It wasn't timid and broken. It was royal. A surge of pride nearly brought him to his knees. His once frightened mate, the girl who doubted her worth, now stood between him and death, with a growl that carried the weight of an ancient bloodline. His eyes burned gold as he watched her. "That's my Luna," he whispered, voice thick with emotion and reverence. That night, while Rosie was sleeping, from the forest beyond Nightshade Hollow, dozens of wolves burst through the dark, like shadows breaking free of chains. The alarm horns sounded across the territory, sharp and urgent. Warriors shifted mid-run, fur tearing through skin, claws striking earth. Rosie jerked awake in Damon's bed. Her heart pounded wildly. Outside, chaos roared. "Damon?" she called, but he was already gone. Alpha Damon Blackwood stood at the gates, shirtless, eyes blazing molten gold. Fenrir surged inside him, massive and furious. Enemies. The scent hit him immediately. Blackthorn Pack. Victor Thorn had come for war. Damon's lip curled. "You dared." Jax shifted beside him, fur bristling. They brought allies. Dozens. Damon didn't hesitate. "Defend Nightshade Hollow," he roared. And the Alpha shifted. Fenrir burst into the world in a storm of power, huge and midnight black, with eyes glowing like twin suns. His howl shook the mountains. The battle began. Inside the estate, Rosie ran into the courtyard, barefoot in a thin nightdress. Servants tried to stop her. "Miss Rosie, please." But she could smell blood. She could smell Damon. She ran as fear gripped her chest. She wants to be with her mate, Alpha Damon. The battlefield was a storm of teeth and claws. Nightshade Hollow wolves fought with brutal precision, Damon at the front, tearing through enemies like thunder made flesh. But Blackthorn wolves were desperate. Desperate wolves were dangerous. One leapt toward Damon's blind side. Rosie saw it. Time slowed. Something inside her snapped. Not fear, not panic, but power. A scream ripped from her throat. Not human, not wolf, both. Her bones burned, skin split. She fell to her knees as fire tore through her body. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt free. Her first shift came like lightning. Her spine arched, muscles stretching into shapes they were meant to take. Silver-white fur burst across her skin, like moonlight blooming. Pain lanced through her, but beneath it was strength she had never known. Memories flashed, running through forests as a child, a woman laughing. A crown of ash-shaped leaves, Ashen Crest. Her wolf rose, strong and royal. She stood on 4 paws, trembling, breath fogging the air. She was beautiful, larger than most she-wolves, fur shimmering pale silver, with streaks of smoky black. Her eyes burned bright amber, like sunrise through fog. The battlefield froze. Even Damon felt her. Fenrir turned and went still. Mate! Awe filled him. Rosie didn't think. She leapt. The Blackthorn wolf, about to tear into Damon, never saw her coming. She slammed into him mid-air, claws slashing deep, strength shocking even herself. The wolf crashed into the dirt with a howl. Damon spun, stunned. Rosie stood over him, growling, fur blazing with faint silver light. Fenrir's heart thundered. She protected us. Damon's chest swelled with pride so fierce it hurt. Rosie's wolf looked at him, recognition flooding her gaze. Mine. Then she turned back to the battlefield and fought. Blackthorn wolves hesitated. This wasn't the weak Omega they had known. This was ashen crest blood. Rosie moved as if she had trained all her life, her instincts, older than memory, guiding her. She dodged, struck, and shielded Nightshade wolves with her body. At one point, she saw Damon pinned by 3 attackers. Rage exploded inside her. Silver light burst from her fur. She howled, and then the ground trembled. A shockwave threw wolves backward, like leaves in a storm. Everyone stared, even Alpha Damon and Beta Jax. Victor Thorn, watching from the tree line, went pale. "That's impossible," he whispered. But Rosie stood swaying. The glow faded. Her wolf whimpered. She tried to step toward Damon and collapsed. She shifted back mid-fall. Damon caught her. Her skin burned under his hands, feverish and pale. She looked fragile again, too fragile for what she had just done. "Rosie!" Damon shouted. She didn't answer. Fenrir panicked. "She's dying." "No," Damon snarled. "She's just exhausted." But fear clawed at him anyway. Rosie's eyelids fluttered weakly. "Damon," she whispered. "I'm here," he said, voice breaking. "I protected you." His throat closed. "You did." Her fingers twitched against his chest. Then went still, and then her head fell back. Rosie Holland, the lost heir of Ashen Crest, went unconscious in Alpha Damon Blackwood's arms. Blackthorn fighters howled in rage and desperation, circling, unwilling to admit defeat while their alpha still stood. Victor Thorn stepped forward at last, tall, scarred, eyes cold as winter iron. He looked at Rosie and Damon's arms and smiled. "A slave Omega brought you to your knees, Blackwood," Victor sneered. "You've gone soft." Damon handed Rosie carefully to Jax. His fingers lingered for 1 second too long, brushing her cheek. Then he turned, and the air changed. Fenrir rose inside him, like a storm swallowing the sun. Damon's voice carried across the battlefield, sharp and absolute. "Victor Thorn," he said, "end this." Victor's grin widened. "A duel?" Damon's eyes burned gold. "Alpha to alpha. Winner claims victory. Loser's pack retreats." Victor laughed. "You think I fear you?" Damon stepped forward. "You should." Victor's smile vanished. Pride wouldn't let him refuse. Every wolf knew it. "I accept," Victor said. The battlefield fell silent. They shifted at the same time. Victor's wolf was massive, dark brown, thick with muscle, and old scars. He was brutal strength made flesh, known for tearing enemies apart without mercy. But Fenrir was something else. Midnight black, towering, eyes blazing like twin suns. Power rolled off him in waves so heavy that weaker wolves whined and dropped their gaze. 2 alphas, 1 fight. Victor lunged first, aiming for Fenrir's throat. Fenrir twisted, claws raking Victor's flank in a flash of black lightning. Blood sprayed across the snow. Victor snarled, spinning to slam his weight into Fenrir's side. The ground cracked under them. They rolled, snapping jaws inches from flesh. Victor was fast. Faster than Damon expected. He ducked Fenrir's bite and sank his teeth into his shoulder. Fenrir roared, slamming Victor into a boulder so hard it shattered. The watching wolves gasped. Victor came back harder, eyes wild, ripping into Fenrir's leg. Fenrir staggered, but his dominance surged like thunder. The forest itself seemed to tremble. Finish him, Fenrir growled. Damon's mind was ice cold. He circled, watching Victor's breathing, his stance, the slight limp from the earlier strike. Damon had led corporations and wars alike. He knew how to read weakness. Victor lunged again. Fenrir ducked low, then struck. His jaws clamped onto Victor's neck, not killing yet, but crushing, forcing the rival alpha to the ground. Victor clawed wildly, ripping into Fenrir's chest. Blood poured. Fenrir growled deeper, pushing harder. Victor's eyes met Damon's. Fear flickered. "You won't keep her," Victor choked. "She belongs to Ashen Crest, to them." Rage exploded in Damon. "For everything you did to her," Damon snarled, voice human beneath the wolf. "This ends now." Fenrir's jaws tightened. Bones snapped. Victor Thorn went still. Silence swallowed the battlefield. Blackthorn wolves stared in horror as their alpha fell lifeless to the snow. Damon released the body slowly and stood tall over it, blood dripping from his fur. His howl shook the mountains. A victorious alpha's call. Blackthorn wolves broke. They ran. Some shifted mid-flee, scrambling through trees, dragging their wounded, their pride shattered. Without Victor, they had no claim, no courage, no leader. Nightshade Hollow wolves roared in triumph, but Damon didn't celebrate. He shifted back, ignoring his wounds, and ran to Rosie. She lay pale in Jax's arms, breath shallow, face soft as if sleeping. Damon fell to his knees beside her. "Rosie," he whispered. No answer. He pressed his forehead to hers, trembling despite himself. Fenrir's voice, usually fierce, was quiet with fear. She gave too much. Damon closed his eyes, gripping her hand like a lifeline. They won against Blackthorn. Victor Thorn was dead. Blackthorn had retreated. But as Damon held his silent mate in his arms, one terrible truth echoed in his mind. Ashen Crest were still out there, and they wanted Rosie back. Chapter 13. Nightshade Hollow's Heir. The days after Alpha Victor's fall were strangely quiet, as though the forest itself needed time to breathe. Smoke no longer curled above Nightshade Hollow's treetops, and the wounded slowly healed under the care of pack healers. Rosie moved through the recovery like a ghost at first, still pale from the surge of power that had nearly consumed her. Yet something inside her had changed. Her wolf no longer hid in the shadows. It walked beside her, steady and awake. "My wolf is awake. I will name her Koliv." Her wolf growled a little in approval. When the emissaries from Ashen Crest arrived, they did not come with demands or chains. They came with bowed heads. Their alpha, silver-haired and weary-eyed, spoke gently. They had searched for her for years. They had sensed her scent when Damon found her, because the old magic in her blood had begun to stir the moment her true mate drew near. The mate bond awakened her dormant lineage, the ancient scent of Ashen Crest that had been hidden beneath years of fear and suppression. When Damon claimed her as his destined mate, that buried heritage had flared to life, like embers catching wind. That was why they had known, why they had come. They asked her to return. Rosie listened in silence, her hands folded, her eyes drifting to Damon standing behind her. The Ashen Crest wolves spoke of destiny, of legacy, of her birthright to lead. They spoke of ancient halls waiting for her footsteps to fall. "We need you in our pack, Luna Rosie," the alpha spoke politely, but Rosie shook her head. "I don't think I am ready to lead a pack. Not yet." Her voice was soft, yet steady. Not when she was still learning how to stand without fear, still learning her wolf strength, still discovering the woman she was meant to become. There was someone stronger, wiser, better suited to guide Ashen Crest for now. She needed time to grow, to train, to heal, but she did not reject them. "In the future, I will visit and learn our history, know our bloodline, and honor them. Just not now. We will be waiting for you." When they left, there was no anger, only pride in their eyes. That night, under a sky heavy with stars, Nightshade Hollow gathered in the sacred clearing. Torches flickered. The air hummed with old magic. Damon stood tall, wearing ceremonial black trimmed in silver. Rosie wore white, her hair braided with moonflowers and ash leaves. The mate-marking ceremony began. Damon knelt first, not as alpha, but as mate, and vowed to protect her, trust her, stand beside her, never above her. His voice carried through the clearing, steady as thunder. Rosie's vows trembled at first, then strengthened as her wolf Olive rose inside her, proud and unafraid. She promised loyalty, honesty, and courage. She promised to grow into the Luna Nightshade Hollow deserved. When Damon marked her, the bite was fierce but tender. The bond snapped into full strength, blazing through them both like wildfire and starlight. Rosie gasped as her wolf surged forward. Not wild, not lost, but whole. The pack howled. Some cried. Fenrir stood closest, eyes shining, his protective stance easing at last. Peace slowly returned to the lands. Without Victor's iron grip, Blackthorn fractured into frightened remnants that scattered into distant territories. Their reign of cruelty crumbled like old stone. And Rosie changed. She trained every morning until her clothes were soaked with sweat. She sparred, stumbled, and rose again. She learned strategy, diplomacy, and healing rites. She listened more than she spoke. She laughed more easily. Her wolf Kaliv stood taller. The timid girl who had once feared her own shadow was fading. In her place stood a woman with quiet fire in her bones. Not just Damon's mate. Not just the lost daughter of Ashen Crest, but a future Luna, steady, fierce, and worthy of standing beside an alpha, not behind him. The first hint came quietly. Rosie had been training in the early morning light when the healer suddenly stopped mid-sentence, her eyes widening in realization. A few moments later, the news spread through the inner circle like wildfire until Damon himself stood stunned in the healer's chamber. Rosie sat on the edge of the bed, hands trembling over her stomach. "You're certain?" Damon asked, his voice softer than anyone had ever heard it. The healer smiled warmly. "Without a doubt, Alpha. Luna Rosie carries your air." For a long moment, Damon didn't move. Fenrir stirred deeply within him, pride swelling like a rising tide. "Our pup," his wolf murmured. Damon slowly dropped to his knees in front of Rosie, his large hands gently covering hers. "You're going to be a mother," he whispered. Rosie's eyes shimmered with tears, but this time they were not from fear. "We're going to be parents." Damon pulled her into his arms, holding her as though she were the most precious thing in the world, which, to him, she was. That evening, the entire Nightshade Hollow Pack gathered in the great clearing beneath the ancient moon tree. Torches burned bright, casting warm gold light across hundreds of excited faces. Whispers rippled through the crowd as Damon stepped forward with Rosie beside him. She stood taller than she once had, her hand resting lightly over her stomach, her silver wolf calm and proud beneath her skin. Damon raised a hand, and the clearing fell silent. "Tonight," Alpha Damon Blackwood announced, his voice carrying across the entire territory, "I bring news that will shape the future of Nightshade Hollow." The wolves leaned forward in anticipation. Damon glanced at Rosie, warmth filling his gaze. "Our Luna," he said proudly, "carries the air of Nightshade Hollow." For one heartbeat, the clearing was stunned into silence. Then the forest exploded with joy. Howls of celebration echoed through the mountains. Wolves embraced, cheered, and laughed. Even the most hardened warriors grinned like children. Firelight danced as the pack erupted into a celebration that would be remembered for generations to come. Beta Jax clapped Alpha Damon on the shoulder with a wide grin. "An heir already, Alpha. The pack couldn't be happier." Rosie laughed softly as several pack members approached to bow respectfully before her. Not out of fear, but out of love. The once frightened Omega, who had arrived trembling at Nightshade Hollow, had become their Luna, their future. As music began to rise and wolves danced beneath the moonlight, Damon gently took Rosie's hand and pulled her close. "You changed my life," he murmured. Rosie smiled up at him. "You saved mine." Damon tilted her chin upward, his eyes filled with pride, love, and something deeper. Destiny fulfilled. Then, in front of the entire pack, Alpha Damon Blackwood kissed his Luna, and beneath the moonlight, surrounded by the howls of their celebrating pack, Rosie finally knew she was exactly where she belonged.
And that brings us to the end of this story. Thank you for listening all the way through. We hope this audiobook kept you entertained and left you wanting more. If you enjoyed it, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Let us know what kind of stories you'd like to hear next. There are plenty more full audiobooks waiting for you here, so be sure to check out the channel for your next great listen. Until next time, happy listening.